Hi, everybody. Welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. I have something interesting to share with you. So, as you know, I started this new channel called Explore Church Sites. This year, my family and I moved from Kansas to Independence, Missouri, and I started doing some video tours and posting them on Christian Homestead. But I quickly realized that I just needed to do a completely separate channel for video tours of church sites around here. And as I've gone through this exercise of hunting down all these sites, not just the big ones, everybody knows about the big sites, but tracking down all the small sites, I've realized some things. And I want to share one of those things with you right now. So this is at Adam-ondi-Ahman. Adam-ondi-Ahman has all these markers, these numbered markers. This one is up on Spring Hill, and this marks the spot of the survey marker when they first started to survey this area for a city. And it has the date on there. The date is October 31st, 1833. Now, that caught my attention because, number one, 1833, and around that time, that's when the Saints started to be driven out of Jackson County. So as this survey marker was placed here at Spring Hill in Adam-ondi-Ahman, at that same time, the Saints were being driven out of Jackson County. And this date specifically stuck out because it wasn't too long ago that I was in Liberty, Missouri, looking at the 8 Witnesses Monument, and I was looking at these names. This was the first stake presidency in Missouri. Both the president, the stake president, David Whitmer, and his counselors, as well as the first high council. And I noticed this name right here, Levi Jackman, because my dad would always talk about him. He's one of our ancestors. Specifically, he's my great-great-great-great-grandfather. And I knew that he was part of that first group that entered the Salt Lake Valley. There's actually a historical marker near Temple Square that has all the names of all the people that were in that first group. And I knew that because that's what my dad would always say, but I had no idea that he was in Missouri or that he was part of the first High Council. And so I wanted to verify. I went to his profile on Family Search. So far, nobody's put in the fact over here that he lived in Missouri and he actually lived in Jackson County. I went to Memories, and thankfully he has an autobiography. I chose this one just because it's the easiest to read, but you know how it is with Family Search. People will, submit the same thing over and over again. So there's like 100 copies of his autobiography. So I chose this one. So I read through it because I wanted to verify, if he was on that high council. And in fact, he was. It says it here in his autobiography. But as I was reading through this, let me just read you this part. Okay. On the 20th of July, 1833, a meeting of from 300 to 400 of the mob gathered at Independence to commence their operations of destruction. They tore down our printing office. And by the way, that's the W.W. Phelps print shop. When you go to the Independence Visitor Center, downstairs, as they're giving you the tour, they have a recreation of his print shop. Continuing, a 2-story brick building, and destroyed most of the contents. They stripped and tarred and feathered Bishop Partridge and one Allen, and threatened death and destruction to all the saints if they did not leave the country. Some of our leading men, for the sake of a compromise for the present time, agreed for themselves to leave the country. One half of them by the 1st of January next, and the other half by the 1st of May. And to use their influence to have all the church do the same, hoping something would turn in our favor before that time. We laid the matter before the governor, but he had not power to help us. After frequent insults and abuses, they laid a plan to be carried into effect on the evening of the 31st of October. Okay, so this is really interesting. Okay, so that stuck out to me. Adam-ondi-Ahman survey marker, October 31st, 1833. On that same day, that's when this plan was supposed to go into effect. Um, if you go to the church website, at least here, this is some manual letters, Latter-day Saint history, 1815 to 1846 teacher manual. It talks about the fact that the expulsion occurred essentially late October to November 1833. But we have this specific date right here that I knew of. And then more recently, at Far West, or at least if you go south on that highway about a quarter mile or so, Far West is just in the background over here, but south of Far West, you have this hill called the Eminence, and the sign says, location where Joseph Smith was surrendered to Missouri militia on October 31st, 1838, ending the Mormon War and bring closure to Far West City. So it's like, isn't that strange? With Adam-ondi-Ahman, you could say this is kind of how it started. I don't know when the Saints started to live there. I don't think it was as early as 1833. I don't think it was until like something like 1836. I could be wrong. I think that this was just put here by like a government surveyor from what I've read, but I have to dig deeper into it. But you could say, in a sense, October 31st was a day that started Adam-ondi-Ahman as like a city. And October 31st was a day, in effect, that ended our presence in Jackson County in those early times and ended our presence at Far West. So you see where I'm going with this? We just recently had a transition from President Nelson to President Oaks. And I'm not going to repeat all the things that we've noticed about these two presidents of the church. There's so many unusual things. I do have a couple new things to point out to you that are happening on really interesting dates this year. So the idea here, before I continue, is, are these dates that now in the future, might these be dates where there's some kind of return or there's some kind of special event? And I feel like there's reason to believe that. Let's go to, now this is north of Far West, just about a quarter of a mile. There's these three sites that you can see at Far West, not just the temple site. You go a little bit to the north, just about a quarter of a mile, and you have the Elder Charles C. Rich cabin. Interestingly, I moved here earlier this year, and I was here in time to document the dedication of this cabin. This is the only surviving structure from the Far West period. Okay? It's the only surviving structure. And they chose a very specific date to dedicate the cabin and to unveil this new statue. August 8th, 2025, because August 8th, and I just went here, I'm sure you can find this other places, but this is Missouri State Parks. They have a copy of, this is United States Department of the Interior, National Park Service, National Register of Historic Places, inventory, nomination form. And this is talking about Far West. I'm just going to read this line right here. On August 8th, 1836, the Mormons officially established the mile square town site of Far West as their new quote-unquote capital. So it's interesting that this year, even though this may not represent like a grand return to Far West, or maybe it could, maybe it's a foreshadowing of things to come, but they decided to dedicate this symbol of survival, or this symbol of our presence at Far West. They dedicated it on that anniversary, right? Of course, we have the temple site as well, but we have this sole surviving building that's been restored And now it's there for everybody to enjoy. And hopefully it's a sign of things to come. But going back to October 31st, it's interesting because one of the things that I was thinking about when I first started my channel was October 31st of the year 2020. Now, I didn't start my channel until after this happened, but one thing that drove me to start my channel is that there was not enough LDS Second Coming content. I wanted more. Back in 2020, I suppose 2019, 2020, there were a few presentations and a few channels that were doing a good job. There was one in particular that got a lot of people really excited, including myself. And I can't remember if it was in that presentation or somebody else's that I'm thinking about, but either one or both of them were looking forward to October 31st because there was going to be this this blue moon. There was a whole bunch of stuff that people were looking at in those years. People were talking about the Revelation 12 sign in 2017. People were looking at the blue moon on Halloween in 2020, because I know one person, he had come up with some kind of timeline. I think it had to do with like the half hour of silence and calculating, how long is that in God's time? How long is it in our time? Well, in God's time, it's half hour. In our in our time, it's whatever it is. I think it's like 20.83 years or something like that. And so October 31st, by that person's calculations, would have been that day, I believe. I can't remember when the start date would have been. Probably, 2001, with the dedication of the Palmyra, New York temple. But okay, so whatever. And then people were also later that year, I think it was during winter solstice on the 21st, there was going to be this conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn, I want to say. And with those two coming together in the sky, it would make it look like it was like one big bright star. And a lot of people are excited about that. So I was paying attention to these things. And once I did start my channel, I decided to look into it further. And it turns out that, let me just read what I have here. Blue moon on Halloween, visible across all time zones in the United States, which hasn't occurred since 1944. The next Halloween full moon, not necessarily a blue moon, but full moon, will be in 2039. So in a few different ways, it was a little bit on the rare side. But when you look at it, stepping back and looking at the big picture, we've noticed a lot of interesting things when it comes to lunar events and presidents of the church. You can pause and read this. I've already went through this like a couple videos ago. I think it was in this video, like turning down the lights in a theater before the final act. That was a super interesting video, by the way. If you missed it, you should go watch it. It has to do with like all this stuff with the moon and recently with, well, I'm going to cover some of it in just a second. Okay. So anyway, October 31st with this blue moon on Halloween. It's interesting. And even more so now that I'm thinking about all this stuff. And then I also made this video called Second Coming Foreshadowing, 30 Days. And in this video, we were looking at some potentially key scriptures which seem to potentially foreshadow our own time, specifically with President Nelson and President Oaks. And the foreshadowing is this, if this is correct, that Moses could have been a potential foreshadowing of President Nelson. One of the interesting things about Moses is that he was essentially beyond his years. The scriptures make it clear that his life had been preserved. And remember, Moses is the one that held the keys of gathering Israel. And we know that President Nelson was all about gathering scattered Israel. He was really using that key that we got from Moses in the Kirtland Temple. Moses lived It says here 120 years old. So he was notably old, just like President Nelson. And then in this chapter, Deuteronomy 31, he talks about the fact that he's not going to be going into the promised land, just like in our own time, President Nelson did not live into the millennium, but he led Israel all the way up to the promised land. And maybe President Nelson led us all the way up to the millennium. But then it was Joshua who led Israel into the promised land. And maybe President Oaks is going to be the one that leads us into the millennium. And there's some days that are mentioned, how after Moses died, they mourned for 30 days. And so I wondered, well, is that going to be maybe a thing for us? You know, what's 30 days after September 27th of this year? And then furthermore, in Joshua chapter 1, it talks about an additional 3 days where Joshua says, prepare your victuals for within 3 days, ye shall pass over this Jordan to go in to possess the land. I don't know if these 3 days happened exactly after the 30 days of mourning were over. So I don't know if it was like 33 days straight and then they possessed the promised land. But there's that to think about. I decided to go ahead and make a new spreadsheet. I haven't named it yet. Right now it's just sheet 105. But here we have the day that President Nelson passed away, September 27th. And so if you start counting the days afterwards, so one day afterwards would be the 28th, and then 2 days would be the 29th. We know that he passed away 7 days before General Conference, and then his funeral was on the 7th. Again, there's so many sevens when it comes to President Nelson. He died on the 27th. He was buried on the 7th. The ceasefire took effect in Israel 3 days after his funeral. His funeral took place during the 2-year anniversary of that war. And then 3 days later, it seems to have ended, or at least right now, at the time I'm making this, there's a ceasefire. And then on the 14th of October, President Oaks became president of the church, which is interesting because President Nelson became president of the church on the 14th of January. 14 is a multiple of 7. So 30 days later would be October 27th, and 33 days later would be October 30th, the day before Halloween, the day before October 31st. So it's just kind of interesting how that plays out. There are some more things to consider. I did want to, let's see, we already talked about this, the funeral. I did want to point out this whole thing with President Nelson. It's really clear that there is a timing. There's like a divine timing, a schedule, a timetable. You know, we've noted that President Nelson served for 7.7 years, but my friend Jen with Christian Fire Poppy, she took it a step further. I saw this video that she put out today. I didn't watch the video because I didn't have time, but the thumbnail says, Prophet Torch was passed in 7 years, 7 months, 7 weeks, 7 days, ... to the hour. Now, I don't know the method that she used, but I tried to, in preparation for this video, just verify it for myself. Even though she's my friend, I like to verify things for myself. I think I did it correctly. I took all the days of President Nelson's presidency, starting with January 14th, being the first day. And, each one of these columns represents a year, meaning a 365-day period, with the exception of 2 of these years, because there were 2 leap years during President Nelson's presidency, 2020 and 2024. So I added, I should zoom in. So I added a day to this column. This column mostly lines up with 2020. It doesn't really matter for the purposes of us counting, but I accounted for those 2 leap years that had an extra day, so 366 days in those years. So you have these 7 365 and also 366 day periods. There's 7 of those, right? A through G, that's 7. And then starting on the 14th of this year, I decided to do the 7 months. Now, I don't know, again, how Jen did it. Because you have months through the year, like some months are 30 days long, some are 31. In the case of February, it's 28, or in a leap year, it's 29. So I just did this like starting on the 14th of each of these months. And I mean, I don't know. So here's the first month, here's the second month, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh. And then from there, you do weeks. So here's the first week, second week, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. And then 7 days. And then if you do like 7 hours, for me, what I calculated, it comes to the 9th. But again, maybe if you account for the different lengths of months, if I was to go back and do it differently, maybe it would land on the 14th when President Oaks became president of the church. Maybe it would have landed on the 7th, the day of President Nelson's funeral. But either way, this is really close. You know, I'm sure that Jen is right, that it's exact. I just have to like call her and see what she did. Sometimes I just do that. I do the cheat option. Instead of watching the whole video, we just like talk to each other. They do that to me too. But I think, yeah, 7 years, 7 months, 7 weeks, 7 days, and potentially 7 hours. That is pretty stunning. And this is all happening just before the 31st of this year. So I don't know. It's interesting. It reminds me of The Living Christ. This was something that was published on the 1st of January of the year 2000, the first day of this new millennium. And I know 2001, but the church was just doing it the simple way, starting on the 1st of January 2000. And it turns out that the total number of words in this document, you can see it here at the bottom left, exactly 700 words. This is Google document. This is the program Google Documents that's calculating this. It does a word count. 700 words in this document. So, okay, so let's go back here. Let's not forget this whole thing with President Nelson. There's been so many things that have happened in September and October. On President Nelson's 101st birthday, that's when Israel struck Qatar, and it seems like that led to the ceasefire. So like that final big act happened on President Nelson's birthday. And then we had what came the next day and a whole bunch of other things. President Nelson, passes away. The next day we have this that took place. His funeral was on the 2-year anniversary of the beginning of the Hamas war. President Oaks, he became president of the church on the 14th, which happened to be the 2-year anniversary of the Utah annular eclipse, of which the path of annularity went through Utah, but it missed all the temples except for one, the Monticello, Utah temple. And that eclipse happened 7 days after the war started. Okay, so now, let's see. Let me just make sure I'm doing this all in order. I just saw this. I got a notification on my phone. This is Live Science. Double comet alert. Comets Lemon and Swan will reach their brightness tonight and tomorrow. Here's how to spot them. Now, unfortunately, I didn't catch this in time. This was published on the 19th. I did see something today, though, that said that one of them is still visible, but our car's having some issues and we don't want to drive it and potentially make something worse. I can't go look at it, and we live in the city now. So, but Comet Lemon C2025A6 makes its closest approach to Earth on October 21st, about 24 hours after the fainter Comet Swan C2025R2 does the same. Well, I keep track of these things. I have a spreadsheet dedicated specifically to comets, meteors, and asteroids. It's called Signs, Comets, Meteors, and Asteroids. And I care about this not just because there's signs in the heavens, but because Joseph Smith said that when the sign of the Son of Man appears, people of the world are going to think that it's a comet or a planet. In one version of it, he said that people would think that it's two great comets coming in contact with each other. So they would attribute it to a natural cause. So these are new. So I went ahead and I added these. They're coming at a very interesting time. I mean, you could say with Comet Lemon, this is 7 days after President Oaks became president of the church. 7 days later. And we have two. There's two of them. And we have these two presidents of the church that became apostles at the same time. They were both called at the same time. The apostles that they replaced died exactly 1 year apart on January 11th of 1983 and 1984. They go together, you guys. President Nelson and President Oaks, it seems like they go together. Even their careers, the one being a heart surgeon and then the other one being the judge. That's what happens. You come to Earth, you go through mortality, you work on your heart, you try and change yourself, and you try and develop charity, and you try to become of one heart and one mind with the rest of the church and become Zion and become pure in heart. And then if you successfully do that, you proceed to the final judgment whenever that comes, and then you're judged. There's a lot of things going on between these two prophets. And on top of that, we have these two comets, which I haven't seen a time like this. The thing about it, you guys, there's always comets, but it's much more rare when they become visible to the naked eye. Okay, these two were both visible to the naked eye 1 day after the other. And they both made their closest approach to Earth, 1 day after the other. I so far, out of all the ones that I've tracked, this has not happened yet. So that stands out. And then on top of that, guess what's happening on October 30th? This strange interstellar object, 3I Atlas, which they still don't know what it is. It seems like there's actually a lot of debate whether it's a comet, like an interstellar rogue comet, or if it's a planetoid, or not a planetoid, a planetary body, which includes planets and moons and large asteroids and just rocky celestial bodies. But they don't know what it is, and there's been all these very strange things about it. I'm keeping track of it right here. Like, you can pause and read through all these. Oops, it's not. You can pause and read through all this right here. Look at column F. And I don't think that I have it all on here. I've been slacking. But this very strange interstellar object, the likes of which we've never seen before, it's showing up on the 30th of October. Okay. After this transition between President Nelson, President Oaks, after us talking about these beginning and end dates with these significant church sites, far west, Jackson County, Adam-ondi-Ahman. I don't know. I'm just pointing out facts. Is there any meaning to it? I don't know. I guess I can't say it for sure, but my opinion is yes, that nothing is coincidence when it comes to spiritual things. There are coincidences, but when it comes to spiritual things, I don't think so. And all this feels very spiritual. And by the way, in this video that I did called Not Normal, Swarm of 7 Comets Heading Toward the Sun Right Now, I went through the hassle of using this tool called theskylive.com, where you can see the movements of the planets and comets as well. And we painstakingly, and I did it in this video, we painstakingly watched what was normal for our solar system when it comes to comets, how often they come around, and do they come in swarms? And yeah, sometimes they come in swarms, but not like this. At least not from the year 2000 to 2025. I watched all those years because this has a feature where you can play and you can just like watch it all play out. And at the end of this year, like right now, as we're speaking, there's this swarm of comets, 7 of them. They are counting 3i Atlas. Let's see, where is it? It's right here, 3i Atlas, which again, we don't know if it's a comet for sure, but if you count 3i Atlas, you have 7 comets that are all coming close to Earth. And not just close to Earth, but within, how did we do it? Oh yeah, one of the things that I was looking for, one thing that I was using to like separate these comets out is if they came within Earth's orbit. And this is the only time right now in 25 years that we've had so many comets that are going inside the circle of Earth's orbit. 3i Atlas is not coming within the circle, but there are a bunch of other ones that are within a very short period of time. So that's what makes this swarm stand out. So I don't know. It just might be a time to look at, think about this year, next year, who knows? Maybe we'll have some kind of event. Maybe the church will announce something on Halloween someday in the future. You know, the building of the Far West Temple or some other major thing. We'll just have to wait and see. Okay, that's going to be it for this one. I'll talk to you guys later.